how's it going, everyone? Hopefully you all are having a wonderful Saturday. Alright, so today's video is not going to be RuneScape related. I do apologize if you were expecting me to, do some 2004 scape. Guess what? Next week I'm starting a new RuneScape series. A lot of you all reached out to me from my previous videos saying, hey, you should start a new series. I'll be doing that next week. But as for today, a lot of people in the PKD community, polycystic kidney community, has been really waiting for me to do this interview. Going to be dropping the interview momentarily, but I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Jacob Torres last week. And Dr. Torres has made so many publications out there regarding polycystic kidney disease. This is definitely one of them. And I'm doing these interviews, especially spread awareness, because a lot of people are really unaware that dietary, or I should say unhealthy lifestyle habits can really contribute to your health if you have this type of kidney disease. All the links that I talk about are going to be down below, especially this publication, too. And if you are from the PKD community out there, definitely comment to this video if you have any more follow-on questions as well. It's definitely very long, but I've been waiting to do this for a while. And if you are watching this, Dr. Torres, thank you so much, brother, once again for doing this interview. It really does mean a lot for everyone in the PKD community. There's a lot of information here, so maybe I don't want to say grab a beer, but let's go ahead and grab some bulletproof coffee, maybe, or just grab some water and sit back. And hopefully, this interview does provide a lot of good information out there. Once again, if you are a typical viewer of mine, it's understand that this is all for awareness, and there's a lot of people with PKD that are really suffering. And once again, before we get rock and rolling here, if any of you all ever come in contact with anyone with kidney issues, please let them be aware of this treatment, because so many people are unaware that you can actually make a dietary intervention to your chronic disease, illness. I mean, there's even case studies now involving it's removing sugar from your life, and it can severely help PTSD. So please do your due diligence. If you ever see or bump into anyone who might be suffering, it really does mean a lot. And yeah, let's get rolling. All right, everyone. We got a very special guest here, Dr. Jacob Torres. First time I'm doing an interview with him. Has done so many various interviews in the PKD community, especially on the Santa Barbara Nutrients YouTube channel. All of Dr. Torres's links, Jacob, will be down below, plus the top pinned comment. But please, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself, give us a little introduction of who you are, your background, what you do, and pretty much what motivated you to get in the realm of pretty much polycystic kidney disease.
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Jacob Torres. I'm a research scientist at the University of California, Santa Barbara. I'm also I'm one of the founders of Santa Barbara Nutrients. We have the first medical food for polycystic kidney disease. I think you might have talked about that before, so maybe people are familiar. That's kind of like where I'm at research wise. But I started off in PKD about 2010. I came to grad school, and I've started on a research project working with polycystic kidney disease in the lab of Thomas Wimes, and I just kind of stayed there because the research, I kind of had so much success in the projects I was working on. We just kept getting further and further, like down the rabbit hole of disease mechanisms and treatments, and I kind of opened up this whole world of ketogenic metabolic therapy for the treatment of polycystic kidney disease. That led to a couple of nice papers, and the founding of this company, Santa Barbara Nutrients, and then since I've just been kind of plugging away at that whole story. So there's a lot to unpack there, but that's kind of where I'm at now.
Yep. Like you said, guys, there's going to be a lot of links, especially in this interview, and the publications, especially if you are out there with PKD yourself or do have a family member, they're extremely lengthy and definitely a good read to actually go on. But as for your publications, what would you say like stands out like the most? It's definitely like because I know talking to Thomas definitely about uric acid was
Mhm.
huge, and alcohol can definitely propel that. It's definitely made me rethink about alcohol entirely. I haven't had a drink since November 22nd, and just thinking back to my 20s when I was pretty much getting hammered like three, four times per week. It's a shell shock actually reading your publication and looking at, especially just, with everything, high consumption of, sugar. But in your own words, like out of your publications, what's something that stands out the most?
Yeah, so I think I guess I mentioned I started with this. So I guess I'll just start real broadly. We generally study polycystic kidney disease in a couple of ways. One is we try to make it worse, and we try to make it better. And the reason we do one of those things is we want to know how does the disease progress? Like what is it that
Hmm.
causes disease progression, and then what is it ways that you can prevent progression? So the field is kind of these are kind of like the big areas because you need to have some model to study this in. So you got to make it worse or make it better. Otherwise, you don't know if there's anything changing. And then you can kind of hone in on the mechanism stuff there. So the first paper, my graduate work was looking at microcrystal injury that causes PKD. And that's where we kind of discovered this kind of crystal clearing mechanism that was kind of innate to all kidneys and seems to be aberrantly activated in PKD. And then the second project that I worked on, like during my graduate and postdoc, was looking at ketogenic diet, time restricted feeding, and fasting, and beta hydroxybutyrate supplementation. Ultimately, all doing kind of the same thing to slow or reverse polycystic kidney disease progression. So we kind of honed in on this metabolic disorder in polycystic kidney disease, and we targeted that as like a treatment. It's something we addressed that underlying issue. Can we kind of reverse the progression of the disease or slow the progression? And that's what we ultimately found was all of those treatments were effective. So what really ends up coming out of this story, the big picture, is that PKD is preventable. The progression is preventable. It seems like what it is we have to prevent the injury. If we can
Hmm.
prevent, and this means like micro injuries, like small insults to the kidney. And in any way, anything that causes an injury will kind of activate these same pathways that are turning into cysts. And so if you can just kind of hone in on like what are these big things you can do day to day that kind of prevent that, that was what's really come out of all of the research so far.
So from your research, definitely one thing that I have my own personal theory about like an onset age, because the onset age is definitely broad. But is there any like key honing? Because I've talked to so many different people. Some people experience an onset age with like no lifestyle, change at all. Mine is a little unique that I do want to get to momentarily, but um, does it necessarily have to come with injury, or can it just be sporadic, or is that still like unknown?
Well, I would argue that the sporadic nature is what implies the environmental component. So the
Hmm.
environmental component would suggest that you would not see the same progression in all individuals that have the mutation in polycystin one or polycystin two. You would expect that if it's environmental, that you would see like some people accelerate really quickly, some people never progress, and what's going on. So the main thing there would be most likely that it's some trigger that's causing the progression to accelerate, or the lack of something that doesn't have that happen. So that's why I think that when I talk about injury, it's
Yep.
really going to be at the microscopic level. Like we're really talking about like small injuries, not just like large insults. So people might progress faster because maybe they just they ate something that was full of oxalate, for instance, and they got a
Yep.
big dose at one time, and it caused a bunch of kidney stones, and those kidney stones then caused a bunch of cysts to grow. So they might have been something like that, or maybe they ate a lot of high processed food when they were young, and they just kind of had all this kidney insult buildup over time, and so they progressed faster. So that would be my hypothesis. Like that's kind of the model that we're working under, is that this is just going to be variable based off of the environment itself.
Could large consumption of definitely sugar, whether it's natural, added, like redefined, could that significantly be like a trigger point too?
Oh, yeah, sugar is definitely going to be one of these triggers. I think that the easiest way to think about this is does it produce an inflammatory response? And if
Hmm.
the inflammatory system is activated, then it'll almost certainly lead to cyst growth. In our lab, it's kind of like kind of a joke that's like, well, you can cure polycystic kidney disease like all these different ways. Like there's a bunch of, we know how to cure it like a million different ways, because you just look at, does it cause inflammation? It's like, yeah, let's go look at it, and it's going to be a thing
Yeah.
that you can target. So it's really kind of too easy in a way, and that it's like, if you just address the underlying inflammatory issue, that's all you have to do. But it's simple but difficult in practice, right? Because you're in this environment where there are lots of tasty foods out there, and there are lots
Hmm.
of things that people are just going to run into in their daily lives. They might not be thinking about are potential injuries of the kidney, and they just are just wouldn't even know that that's an issue if they don't have the information.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's 100% agree. And I do briefly want to, touch on my background because when I got back from my MRI last year, into May, which was just, world shattering, like, hey, you kind of got an issue. Got a phone call the following day after. I'm like, what? So it one of the first things I actually came along was really how sugar can, fuel everything. And I took a zoom out of my life, but I was very big never ran a marathon, but I mean I definitely put miles down. It's winter months, I want to say typically 20, 30 miles per week. Summer months like 30, 40. Set red flags off at a doctor's office once because my resting heart rate was 48 beats per minute. So they thought I had oh, what's it called? Try something. It's where you have a very like low resting heart rate. And my doctor came in, he's like, hey, what's your exercising? Oh, I ran 10 miles yesterday. Was in the military for quite some time, got injured, got the medical route out, and I just stopped exercising for the first time in my life. Went on I thought was a very organic, friendly diet. It was just filled with sugar. Sugary
Mm.
yogurt in the morning, sugary pretty much bread, jam, monsters 45 times a week. Zero sugar though, but they have a whole bunch of other crap that can spike your blood, sugars. And just everything. Everything with sugar, every single meal, every single snack, ate a whole bunch of almond nuts. So it was like textbook definition why these things just progressed the way they did. And I had a freak little kind of like pre-jab in a way, July 21, when I was still on active duty with the military. I went into the hospital, thought I had appendicitis, had a groin sprain. That's how I first, discovered. Was doctor was doing an ultrasound, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you have a whole bunch of it," but these cysts were very small. And then when I, separated, transferred my insurance, 2023, I'm like, hey, something came up, and one ultrasound there, 11.8 for 1 centimeters on one kidney, 13.8 on the other. And then MRI 10 months later and just, gigantic to 14 and 16. But yeah,
Oh
I
wow.
mean, textbook definition 101 was I was taking in 300 grams a day of sugar.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to go back to the protein because when my journey started back in June of last year, and then I started a class with going through the new program September of last year. Definitely, took a gamble because I started leaking protein back in May of last year, right after my MRI, small amount. And I was only consuming 60, 70 grams a day of protein. Now, I wasn't exercising at all. Um, my protein went up, obviously, for a high fat, ketogenic diet to 110 grams of protein, so nearly double. And my labs in December, hey, you stopped leaking that, small amount. So I do definitely want to touch because I did watch an interview with you, and one of the things you said, and this really motivated me to start exercising again, was if you're taking in a lot of protein, are you utilizing that protein? So I would, love to hear your opinion on really protein, exercising with
Mhm.
PKD, if you can chime in.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff there. And that sounds like you just a pretty fast progression from the one scan to the other. That's a pretty big jump. But so have you done anything, have you seen done any scans since then? You did the Renew program and
Oh
you,
yeah. December 4th, did another ultrasound, and that ultrasound, even though it's an ultrasound, came back as the 14-inch not 14-inch. Oh, thank God. 14
centimeters.
centimeter went to 14.2, and the 16 went to 16.1. It is an ultrasound, but next month, getting a slew of new labs, new everything, um, doing another renal panel, another ultrasound, and also another MRI, which is going to be huge. So really, I'll have three ultrasounds to go from, plus two MRIs, which Dr. Wimes is really excited about. Plus, I'm going to do genetic testing as well to kind of really figure, because I got no family history, man. So it's
Mhm.
like I'm either a mutation, but it's going to be interesting to get all that
Yeah,
data.
yeah, that'd be good to know if there's some movement there. I mean, no movement is good too.
Oh,
Like we'll,
I
yeah,
say my prayers. I would I mean, it would be awesome for a miracle, small,
yeah,
but if it can just hold, that would be, because I mean, you're talking in a 10-month span, like a 30% increase.
yeah.
That's like gigantic. Everything I'm reading, and my renal doctor said, hey, on a conservative side, looking at like renal failure in 10 years. So at the time I was 35. So that'd be like 45.
Yeah, that's like you can avoid that. I mean, that's a win right there.
Yep.
So, anyway, back to so your questions about protein and the diet and protein utilization with and exercise, PKD. So it's all kind of together. Okay, it all kind of goes together in one big thing. So you mentioned the protein in the urine, like right, you do your urinalysis
Hmm.
and they look for protein. So that protein is not the same as like the protein you're eating. So I think part of the issue is that the protein that we eat, if you get proteinuria, that's like usually albumin or other proteins they're supposed to be filtered by the glomerulus. You have like this, you have the kidney has these structures. There's a glomerulus, and then the glomerulus has a little capsule around it, and
Hmm.
then that goes into the nephron, right? So if the little capsule is injured, then the protein can kind of like leak in from the serum, like the blood goes from the
Okay.
blood, and it can
Yep.
leak into the nephron. So there's a if that it kind of has like they're kind of like a face, and stuff has to flow through regulated, and if it kind of comes off the face, stuff can kind of just like break through and go through. So it's an indication of the barrier being broken. So when you see proteinuria, it's saying like, oh, you're no longer filtering properly, right? So one thing you would think is like, okay, well, is it if I just reduce my protein, am I just like, is it just there's too much protein and they can't filter it properly? It turns
Hmm.
out like that's not really the function here. That's not what's actually happening. It's just that the barrier itself has been broken, and so stuff's coming through. So if it goes away, that means that the barrier no longer is in play. Like something else, it's either healed itself or scarred or something else has happened to where those functional those nephrons are either they could just cut themselves off from the circulation and they no longer are filtering, or they might have healed themselves to the point where they like attached again. So there are diseases like glomerulonephritis where this is like that barrier is just goes away, just kind of becomes sclerotic or inflamed and just comes off, and they get a lot of proteinuria and these other leakiness. So that's kind of the fear, is that this thing becomes inflamed and then it overall becomes scarred and then no longer is functional anymore. So the connection between protein in the diet and the protein in the urine is not one-to-one. It's not like that's what's happening, because when you eat protein, it's just getting broken down into single amino acids and then absorbed into the blood, and the blood now has your amino acid levels go up, and then your body synthesizes proteins from that, right? It doesn't actually go from whole proteins into the blood and then into the urine. That's not a very efficient way to digest protein. It's all digested in the gut and the stomach, and then it's absorbed as a single amino acids or small peptides. Those are generally the other ones. So you could increase these little peptides, but I don't believe that that's the only thing that would be showing up in the urine. It's usually other blood proteins that are abundant in the blood that end up in the urine that they measure. So there's like total protein, and there's like albumin. They have like these other, you might have seen those on the panels. They show these different components of the urine, like they're measuring different things. So albumin's one of them. If albuminuria is another one of these bigger proteins that's getting through, then it's also another thing that people look out for in that. So anyway, that's like kind of the little bit about like, okay, so you digest the protein. If it ends up in the bloodstream in the point where it's like not being used for anything, that's a problem, in that it's just, you're kind of now having to filter all this extra stuff. You're just filtering all these extra amino acids. They're not actually doing anything for you. So and those usually end up getting just kind of either turned into like they can be turned into energy substrates. Like if you eat a lot of protein at one time, you can convert that through gluconeogenesis into something that's usable, or it just gets peed out and you just don't even use it. Just kind of gets wasted. Like you just kind of get or poop it out. Those are the other options, right? It's kind of just wasted stuff that you don't need. So you want to make sure that if you're eating protein, that it's actually going to good. And normal people, just healthy individuals, generally don't consume enough protein. Just on the average, people are pretty poor in their protein intake. And there's even, one of the reasons people tend to overeat is they generally don't eat enough protein, and they end up, your body kind of seems to have like some mechanism of like searching for essential nutrients. So when you get a lot of calories, a lot of times your body's like expecting there to be protein with that. And if it doesn't get it, just looks for more food. Like it's like there's got to be protein in something that I'm eating at some point, but you might get food that's high caloric and low protein, and so it just doesn't end up being enough. So it ends up tending people to overeat. And protein's very satiating, so once you eat it, it's hard to eat a lot more than you need to begin with, because anybody who's ever just eaten a piece of chicken breast would be like, I'm pretty full after I eat a piece of chicken breast, because it's like that's like a lot of protein at one time. There's signals for satiety that say that's enough to eat, and most people aren't even getting that in their normal day-to-day intake. So if you're overeating protein, like that gets into a different realm than just getting adequate protein. And a lot of the recommendation for kidney disease, for chronic kidney disease specifically, was to restrict protein intake to prevent the loss of kidney function. And this came up because there was an observation that when you eat protein, you have a transient hyperfiltration occur, which means that the kidney function, the eGFR, goes up because the blood vessels constrict, and so they start to push more. They have higher pressure, so they're pushing more blood through the filtration system. And so that's normal when you eat protein. It's just the body just increases the filtration because there's certain amino acids that trigger that response. And that is associated with hyperfiltration, which is also observed during chronic kidney disease. Like if you have as you start to progress through the disease, you'll notice that people will end up getting this hyperfiltration effect towards the end of the disease. So the kidney function drops, and then all of a sudden they get this like spike in filtration rate. And that's bad, because that means you're getting to the end of the kidney function. Like it's no longer working properly. So I think that the fear is that you're like pushing towards that end stage renal disease where you're getting hyperfiltration. But it seems to be that that's not the case. It's just they've done research on this, and there's a number of papers specifically with even PKD patients showing that increased protein intake does not accelerate disease progression. And this is comparing it to protein restriction, which is I think 40 grams a day, something like somewhere around there, if I remember the paper off the top of my head, versus like 80 to 120 grams a day. So like moderate protein intake for individuals. And it's kind of, I think it was based off of body weight, I believe, as well. But we're talking like 80 to 120, and that is, some people would say very high. I mean, some people would say that's high. That's probably at the bottom end of the adequate, if you're trying to exercise, that's probably adequate to below adequate range for most people. And, they were showing no effect in the kidney function decline or disease progression of PKD. So it does not seem like that, and that does anything. So the protein is like kind of off the table as a disease modifier for accelerating the disease.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's definitely really good to know because so much of the mainstream it's narrative is limit your protein, and just like you said, too little could potentially cause harm and stuff.
Yes.
Um, the way that it was explained to me was proteinuria because I'm definitely not in this field, so I had to do a lot of self-education. Was kind of picture like a pasta strainer in a way, and if like pasta is getting through, then that would be like protein maybe leaking through and stuff. Um, but yeah,
That's
so
that's about right. The pasta
it's,
strain analogy
yeah,
works as well.
that's how my doctor explained, because I'm like, talk to me like I am under a rock with this. Like I do not like proteinuria. That kind of sounds like a good like custom beer or something. Like honestly. Um but yeah, so it's one of those crazy things. And just like you said, what are you doing, with this protein? Now, does definitely going from a state of being unfit, or stopping, exercising, to then, starting to exercise, moderate, level of training, nothing, too intense. Is that, definitely depends on your progression and, GFR. Can that be beneficial for anyone out there that is like leaking a large amount? Like, would that suck away a lot of the leakage and potentially heal some of those gaps and stuff?
Yeah, so the leakage stuff, and I think that the general consensus is that that's supposed to just be permanent. Once you have like
Hmm.
these cells are called podocytes. Once they detach from the basement, the membrane that they're attached to, they kind of like stay that way. But I find that the body's much more clever than we think it is, and it finds
Hmm.
ways to heal some of these little things that it can do. So I imagine there are some potential for reattachment or regrowth, depending on like how severe the injury is. I imagine there's probably some of that. I don't know because nobody's ever really like looked at that, like to see if that's a thing. Like they could actually, what method would you use to reattachment and whatnot. But what we do see is things like if you do like a different dietary interventions for people that have kidney function decline, they seem to regain some kidney function like over time when they're on these interventions. So there seems to be some healing capacity either of the remaining nephrons to become more efficient, or for the ones that are maybe damaged to become effective again. And when it comes to exercise, I think that exercise is probably the most powerful tool that people have. Besides, diet and exercise are like
Hmm.
the two most powerful things that we have access to. And I think there's two papers on exercise in PKD animals, and they both showed very strong effects on progression and even like it's kind of amazing. The experiment is pretty straightforward. They just take rats and they force them to run till exhaustion. So it's a forced training experiment. It's kind of a pretty standard type of experiment. And they look at the kidneys after these animals do this for, I think they did it for 12 weeks. They made them run, and their kidneys are significantly healthier than the untrained animals, the ones that were not
Oh
on the
wow.
treadmill. And in our model, that we've been working with our lab, we studied beta hydroxybutyrate as a kind of a potent mediator of all of these effects. One of the big things that happens during exercise is you get a big ketosis effect. Like ketosis is
Yep.
part of exercise, so
Hmm.
it's likely one of the things about beta hydroxybutyrate. It signals that there's a healthy metabolic state because it signals that there's fat metabolism going on, and it probably maintains a lot of the function of cells because it just signals that, like, hey, everything is going well. We're using energy effectively, and BHB itself is a signaling molecule. It's not just an energy substrate. It's really the signaling effect of it is what's we believe is very important as well. And that's, like, I think part of why exercise is beneficial is you get all of these like you get so many benefits. Like you could just kind of like go down the list of like all the things that it does. And for PKD specifically, you're getting a huge anti-inflammatory response.
Hmm.
There's many different anti-inflammatory things that come out of the muscle tissues themselves. Those make it into circulation, and then they modify the immune system. And the immune system is really the thing that progresses PKD. Like if the immune system is overactive and busy, like doing things, and it has nothing to do most of the time. And so if you give it nothing to do, it finds things to do. And if you have PKD, it's going to go to the kidneys and start messing around with making fibrosis and activating other immune cells in the kidneys. And that's really where a lot of the progression comes from, is from immune cells that are in the kidney. And
Hmm.
that's pretty well researched and studied. And exercise can dampen the overactivity of immune cells. You think about it, in exercise, you have to use a lot of energy. You're expending a lot of energy and resources, and the body only has so much energy. Like it can only devote so many resources to different things. So by one thing is you might actually just be kind of like putting a lot of movement, into the muscle tissue and all these other energy resources that the body's like, hey, well, we can't waste all this time on this immune cell stuff because it's too costly, because it's such a costly system. And it's similarly for fasting and ketogenic diet. They both suppress the immune system in a way that seems to be advantageous for PKD as well. So it's that, and then you end up addressing kind of like the fatty acid oxidation impairment, which is a big part of the cyst lining cell phenotype, is they seem to be very glycolytic. So they really eat a lot of sugar or a lot of glucose. And that seems to be, if you restore the fatty acid oxidation side, where you're able to use more fatty acids and fat for energy, that seems to be kind of reparative as well. So a lot of stuff for PKD with exercise.
Was definitely hoping you had the mice do some deadlifts in some bed. So oh, okay, that answers a lot about my life, and hopefully anyone watching that can so I am very fat adapted. Like I've been consistent months. So my I have a hard time unless I'm doing a prolonged fast, typically anything longer than 36 hours, as much as like 48 typically do once or twice a month. My ketones don't go as high as they used to. Like I'm talking typically daily day between zero point 0.6 and maybe zero point 0.9. Um, I do something. I focus on volume now. And I encourage this to anyone, just focus on volume over intensity. I used to do these crazy workouts years ago. Purposely got one of my old apartments 3.2 miles away from a YMCA so I could run there, swim for an hour, then run back. Like it's yeah, I'm not doing any of that like crazy stuff, but I mean, hey, there could be people in the community that, may still be doing that, which is great if they can, but um if I do weightlifting, light weightlifting, right? Like I just did today, tomorrow like I get a boost in ketones. I go on walks, love walking, boom, ketones go up, light jogging, boom. I go from like, and I notice this, and I'm just like, wow, you're totally right. One of the things that I did see in an interview that you did was especially for cardio running, it puts you into a temporary state of ketosis.
Right.
And I'm searching for a lot of answers, about my own life. I know so many people are as well, but it just makes sense of all the miles that I ran, and then I stopped doing that for 2.5 years, and flip-flopped of this abundance of carbs. But Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, I pretty much collected really good data because I did 4.5 months straight with no cheat meals whatsoever, just straight keto. Got my
Mhm.
lab results in December, and I'm like, all right, it's awesome. I'm gonna enjoy myself on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. Christmas Eve, I ended up going to the gym, did cardio. It was a carb fest. Ended up doing like 500 carbs that night. Next day, um, can't. I think I might be able to share my screen. I'll put it on when I edit this video. I'll throw it on the screen. Next day, I kid you not, I in my blood it was a 0.5. So I was theoretically, like it blew my mind. Now, gyms were closed on Christmas Day, so I also enjoyed myself then. Following day, woke up, it was zero point 0.1, so I was out of, ketosis, but I was blasting cardio, and I noticed that in the evening, I would have my ketones be like zero point 0.7. So yeah, but then, in the morning, I would be out of so I was in a temporary state of ketosis for like I want to say a good solid 8 days it took me to regain, and I've been in a consistent state since. Plus, I was taking, keto citra during those 8 days out of, temporary ketosis. But it blows my mind because there are so many people out there, unfortunately, that think ketosis is this scary thing. And I'm like, you ever exercise, you go into this temporary state. Um, so, as for a lot of the younger folks that are very much either not progressed at all, um, like any advice you can give to them from like a physical standpoint, is exercising gonna naturally help even if they're not like on a ketogenic diet and stuff, right?
I would think so. I mean, that would be my assumption. I don't think that there was any reason to assume that it would be harmful. I think almost certainly it's a very helpful thing. The ketogenic diet, I think, is good. I think that's what we advocate for that in the Renew program. I mean, that's our whole thing, our whole shtick of that
Hmm.
program is that we're talking about doing ketogenic metabolic therapies. But it's in the name, ketogenic metabolic therapy. Exercise is a,
Yeah.
a ketogenic therapy because it produces a state of ketosis. It does require a little bit of work because the body is kind of like substrate, like it's substrate efficient. It kind of tiers the substrates for the activities. So if you have carbohydrates around and you have a system that's kind of more in that domain where it's very carb dependent, it'll just burn through carbohydrates. It'll just go through them
Hmm.
until it gets to the point where it's like, okay, well, we got to start pushing on that fatty acid oxidation system. And so you have to train that system. Like you have to be, doing things that are going to get you to the point where you're using fats. And one of the things, like with the ketogenic diet, is you're just restricting carbohydrate, right? You're just saying, get scared of all. It's just force the issue that these cells must burn whatever is available. And if it's only fats, then it's just going to be fats. That's just what it's going to do. So you're at least addressing the part of where you're like getting the substrate into the mitochondria to like burn those things and not burning carbohydrates to make the energy. It's burning the fatty acids to make the energy from that. So that's the ketogenic diet part of it. And then the training through exercise, you can then make that system more efficient and better over time by improving your overall like oxygen utilization, because the more oxygen that you can get into cells during when they have all of these fats to use, that means they're going to use them efficiently. They're not going to try to do weird stuff with anaerobic metabolism. They're going to try to really go ahead and use all the oxygen that's coming in and use that efficiently. So the exercise portion addresses that. And it's I don't know. There's a guy that's really I really enjoy. His name's Dr. Mike Nelson. He has a metabolic flexibility, I think, is the name of his podcast, and he's a really cool guy. And I recently did one of his trainings on VO2 max, like
Oh, nice.
aerobic
Yeah.
training. and because the VO2 max is something that's been becoming more and more popular. Peter Attia is one of these guys that talks about the VO2 max being a very good marker of longevity, and it because currently it's like the two big markers of longevity and is strength and VO2 max. Like those are the two strongest predictors of like if you're gonna live long. Is VO2 max I think is like a 450% change in all cause mortality if it's under a certain threshold. So it just it literally is just measuring, can you get oxygen to the cells that and use fat for energy efficiently, and that system you can train it. Like you can go up to a certain amount, and then the aerobic system you can just keep getting better adaptations for like pretty much your whole life. Like the more you run, the more you do things like for those longer duration exercises, you just get more and more adaptations. It's almost endless. It feels like with strength training you kind of get this plateau, and it's like you kind of get these little incremental changes over time. And with the aerobic system, there's just so many adaptations to have that you can just keep going week after week, just still progressing and year after year. So you still see like these ultra marathoners in their 50s and 60s that are still getting better because they're doing these types of trainings. And so I think that's kind of says a lot about like this system is probably something we should focus a lot on, is like this cardiovascular system, because it gets you this ketogenic effect during the exercise, and it improves the fatty acid oxidation. It improves all these other like the capillary density, like all this type of stuff, getting the oxygen to different places. There's so many like small adaptations that are probably almost certainly going to benefit just overall well-being. And then the kidneys is like kind of like as a byproduct, like you kind of get this knock-on benefit from doing these other things as well.
Yeah, no. Thank you so much, brother. That just answered a lot of questions about my past of all the running. Because I mean, don't get me wrong, I did not. I was a pasta hound, definitely Italian all throughout my yeah. It's just, but it makes sense now because it does. And correct me if I'm wrong. If you so, and I've experienced this multiple times, especially in the last several months, more so, just because of the amount of restriction, of carbs. I always would experience this, in my 20s, early 30s, and I would just, eat a ton of, more food, draining your glycogen levels, right? Getting to a point where you're running for a certain period, doing, something aerobic, and your body just I believe it's your liver that runs out of carbs and pretty much just goes haywire, and you get all these hunger cravings. You feel very lethargic. Something like that is could that be beneficial to treat PKD, because then it just sucks in like every like your body's basically going into like a craving type mode, right?
Are you saying to deplete glycogen to some level? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
so does that have any like beneficial effects for like PKD, where your body is pulling in like glucose, pulling in carbs essentially?
Well, in the ketogenic state, liver glycogen is depleted. So
Okay.
it's yeah, that's why it ends up getting to the point of getting ketosis. That's how you get into ketosis. Is glycogen is gone essentially. It's at such a
Gotcha.
low
Yep.
level that it's no longer able to use that, and so fatty acids start to go up. Like so, it's insulin goes down. So insulin's kind of like the real regulator, not just the glycogen, but the
Hmm.
insulin drops, and then that signals the fat cells to release fatty acids, and then the fatty acid levels go up, and then the liver will then now process all these fatty acids to the point when they start to accumulate, and then they just spill into like it just keeps trying to break them down as fast as it can, and then at some point they no longer can break them down and starts making BHB because it's like the byproduct of the breakdown. It doesn't know what to do with these extra fatty acids, so it just starts spilling into the blood, and that's the whole process of that. But you usually have some liver glycogen that's always available because you need a way to like moderate the blood glucose. Blood glucose always has to stay within a certain range because of the brain's there's some parts of the brain that are obligate glucose require, they have to have glucose just for some of the processes that these certain cells require that there is glucose around. They convert it into lactate, and it's kind of like this little place that has, but it uses glucose to do that. And so it's like a requirement for those to keep it around. So blood glucose is very tightly regulated, and some people can get down to like 70, 80, megs per deciliter. That's that's like pretty carb restricted when people are down to that level. That's like kind of the lowest it gets to. When you start going lower than that, people start getting some weird effects that are, not the desirable ones.
Yep. Um,
I don't know if
yeah,
that answered anything. I don't know if that answered anything, but that was.
so it definitely the way I'm looking at it, and definitely not a researcher, like yourself, is that uh cardio, such as walking something. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Our ancestors would walk, what, 2 miles to get like maybe 16 ounces of water or something. So
Mhm.
we all don't get enough, cardio. It's aerobic, even for walking. As for just people in general, it's exercising, especially in the Renew program. It's definitely like kind of really like motivated. Like, hey, gotta get into like a exercising rhythm and like a aerobic cardio rhythm, especially if you're potentially like suffering from like hypertension, because that's
Mhm.
something I noticed that very much dropped is levels of blood pressure for me.
Mhm. Yeah, are you talking about like zone 2 type training, like cardio, or because there's like different kind of types of cardio. When people hear cardio, they might be thinking that they're huffing and puffing to the point where they can't. There's like levels, right? Like there's
Yep. Do you mind going over those really quick and stuff?
Yeah, so there's kind of different training stimulus, right? Like if you're going to do like if you're on a ketogenic diet, one of the tricky things is that things that require glucose are very challenging, right? Because you're
Hmm.
going to feel very lethargic, and the energy is going to be kind of low, and you're also going to stress the system to demand for glucose. So if you are like, I love CrossFit. That's like one of the things I used to, coach CrossFit for a long time. I did a lot of CrossFit, and people would want to do ketogenic diets, and it's like that's not a great strategy because there's a lot of what they call metabolic conditioning workouts, and those are very short duration, high intensity. You're trying to do them as fast as you can, and they are almost exclusively anaerobic. The aerobic part allows you to recover, but the anaerobic part is the engine that like you'd have to use a lot to kind of like do the work at the high intensities, and that is not conducive to like a ketogenic diet. So there you're getting your heart rate into like, you want to max heart rate levels. You're kind of pushing up against the level of like stress that your body can tolerate. So those types of exercises can be really hard or impossible on ketogenic diet unless you're very experienced and you know how to like fuel for them properly. Because I think one of the things is like people are very afraid of carbohydrates on ketogenic diets because they will kick them out of ketosis. But if
Hmm.
you wanted to do like if you were trying to be on a ketogenic diet and you wanted to do like, some high intensity stuff, there are ways to increase your carb tolerance and stay in ketosis. You have to train that way though. You have to like adapt to use the carbohydrates that you're bringing in. And that's actually very preferable because you're increasing your metabolic flexibility. So you're allowing your body's able to switch between substrates. In a perfect world, you would be able to eat any type of food with any macronutrient component, and you would just be able to burn it up. Like your body would know if it's carbohydrate or fat. It doesn't care. It just like it's going to eat it up, and it's efficiently going to do it. But people are very inflexible. Like if you're coming from a standard American diet, there's going to be very high carbohydrate, maybe high in fat, and high in a bunch of sugars and things like that. Those systems are generally going to be very glycolytic dependent and also not very aerobic. They're not using fats very efficiently. So that's like a whole. You're like trying to go from that to ketogenic diet. The reason you do the ketogenic diet from that is because you're trying to rebalance the whole system back to, you're trying to push it hard the other direction to be able to kind of like force adaptation, right? So now now you have like this like adapted system. You could do these high intensity workouts if you are adding carbohydrates in over time and you're getting more tolerant towards them. So during like a during cardio workout, you can kind of, I hope that I explained like at least the energy system, the issue that's going on. Now you're trying to do exercise on top of that. If you're in a ketogenic diet state, or a ketotic state, you're going to be more adapted to using fat. So that means that it's a slower system, but it's highly oxidative. So it uses a lot of oxygen to do the work. And so at lower heart rates, you're very good at pushing energy through because it's the oxygen's at a steady rate. There's only so fast that the fat can go through the system. Like it just kind of has a rate limiter. You have to grab fat, you got to take it into the mitochondria, you got to break it apart, you got to run it through electron transport, and it's a very mechanical system. It just takes time to build the energy up. So if you try to ask it to do a lot very quickly, you will deplete your resources, and then now you're going to feel really tired and not want to be able to do anything. Like during, at least it's going to be very difficult to kind of like summon energy to do the high intensity stuff. So the zone, what they call zone 2 cardio, is this lower intensity. The easiest way to think about this is can you speak while you're doing it? If you can, they tell us the conversational. It's not like you're able to have a full conversation, but you could say several sentences without like rushing it out, and people can understand that you're exercising. That's kind of the way to think about it. If you're at that level, that's kind of the zone 2 system. So it's really easy to measure it that way. You can get really sophisticated and get a heart rate monitor and check your max heart rate through a test and then calculate your zone 2. But using a system where you're like trying to take your age and subtract the difference, there's like these calculators they have for max heart rate to get to zone 2. It's usually garbage because it just doesn't, everybody's so variable in their fitness that it's just better to kind of say like, go do whatever you're doing for your exercise. You like the treadmill, the bike, the whatever it is, and then can you speak while you're doing it? And if you can, and it's easy, then you're not going hard enough. If you can speak, but you feel a little pressure maybe up to speak, you're probably in that right range for the zone 2. When you get to zone 3, it's now becoming a little bit, you can't really talk. You can still like breathe through your nose a little bit, but now it's getting a little more challenging. Nose breathing is another good way to kind of keep your heart rate low so that you can kind of moderate that intensity. But you get to this point where you're starting to want to breathe through your mouth and things are getting hard. Now you're like in the zone 3, and the zone 4 is kind of like where you build this VO2 max aerobic capacity. And those you can kind of like sustain for a period of time, but it's very difficult to like, it's challenging. Those are really like a challenging place to be. And then 5 is like when you're max your heart rate out. So generally for a lot of the aerobic adaptations, you would be down in 2 and 4. Those are your 2 like different levels you want to work at. The 2 range is, I think the current recommendations around 40 to 80 minutes a week in that range. So maybe 2 40-minute workouts a week. If you could do that, that'd be like, that'd be ideal, is to like work on that aerobic system. So
that's really good info.
Yeah, so zone 2 is like 40 minutes probably, because a lot of the adaptations don't start happening until 30 to 40 minutes into the workout. So that's why that range is recommended, because just the body's, it takes a lot of stimulus sometimes to get these things to happen. So that's kind of the range. So if you're doing like a 5K to 7K run ish, that range, you might be in the range of, in the zone 2. If you can keep it in zone 2, that would be like an average workout. And something that's, or on the rower or the bike or whatever you want to pick, something like that. And then the zone 4 stuff, you would do that like, there's like intervals where there's a lot of protocols out there for these intervals, but you would kind of want to be able to find, know what your max heart rate is, and then be in that interval for the zone 4 for like a minute to 2 minutes at a time, and work your way up over a course of many weeks, like adding time every week. And you're doing that once or twice a week. And that workout's, I think, it takes about 6 minutes of total work if you're doing it over the course of many weeks. And there's just you rest in between each set you do. You think about it like, this is the work I'm doing today. I'm going to get on the rower or the bike, whatever. And it's kind of like a sprint. to get up to that heart rate, you hold it and then you just rest and then you just repeat that as intervals. And some people might just do one interval a week, then you kind of build up over time and you progress, and that's the VO2 max component of it. And those are all like excellent, methods for improving the cardiovascular fitness. And those you got to kind of like have very consistent on, because the adaptations are they take a while. They take a while to build up because there's so many like little things that have to happen on the molecular level and on the physiological level, that they do require a lot of consistency, just like with any other training. You think about weightlifting, it's the kind of the same idea. Like, you got to be consistent. It's more about the consistency and the progression that gets you the benefits.
Yeah, one of the big things I used to do years ago was circuit courses. So that would definitely be on the top, just, zero rest, constantly CrossFit, and then, run it's on a track, quarter mile sprint, and then just, redo everything again.
Mm-hmm.
All those zones for PKD though could be definitely very beneficial, right?
Yeah.
Like it's, or is it really dependent on what stage, if you are experiencing a decline in like kidney function, does any of those zones like exclude like CKD, like 4, 3, or like is it, or are all those zones pretty much like, hey, just go towards whichever one you're physically fit and stuff?
That's a good question. When it comes to the when you're getting into level 4 and 3 of CKD progression,
Yep.
you're starting to get into like the ammoniogenesis type issues. Like you're starting to have like actual issues filtering just the normal protein turnover. So you're like building up a lot of the byproducts
Hmm.
of protein breakdown. And so those, I could imagine there could be some issues with like really high intensity stuff. Putting a lot of stress on your system could be really bad. I don't know why aerobic work would be a problem. Like things like the lower intensity, longer duration stuff, I could still see some benefit with that. But people also tend to be very tired when they start to get
Hmm.
longer into the or further into the kidney function decline, just because it's your body's just not filtering the stuff out. So you're building up more byproducts. So it does, I could see that. So like the 3B and 4, I could see stuff being a problem. I've not heard anybody say anything about the two, 1, 2, and 3A stuff.
Hmm.
But that's like I imagine doctors are pretty conservative. They probably would say like be cautious of all of that. And I mean, if you're monitoring things, I think you have a good handle on like what your stress tolerance is and where you would be at. I think that would make sense. I am not a medical doctor, so I'm not gonna
Yeah,
they're
neither am
gonna
I,
do.
but
Yeah.
it's crazy just from, like own experience. Like, yeah, like my workouts used to be the top of the top constantly. So, definitely for the younger folks out there, in the PKD community, that haven't experienced, no problems, progression or whatever, they can pretty much just go ham, and I mean, hey, like you can live normally and not, I mean, hell, run a marathon, or there's nothing essentially stopping them, right?
Yeah, I would think that before you're in the late stages, I don't see any real issues other than if you're doing like, I could see some stuff with like the high endurance activities, like if you're doing like ultra marathon or triathlons, and you're really dependent on like glucose supplementation during those workouts, like, and you're really pushing the red line and also the energy systems that are like on that glycolytic side, like really pushing on those. I could see you generating a lot of free radicals, a lot of oxidation and glycation. Those all could be, or high insulin, like all at the same time for long periods of time. Those could be problems. So I would just see like those are kind of like the things to watch out for if you're doing that type of exercise.
That is really great info, especially for the younger folks. Because there are, a lot of people in various Facebook groups that are fairly young, and they're like, hey, I'm seeing all this stuff, and so it's really just, great info to
Mm-hmm.
really, especially the temporary ketosis also. Yeah, people just do something, please,
Yeah.
please. just walking, anything will make ketones go up.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's true.
that is it's so much great info, Jacob. I appreciate everything. Do you want to, before we move to kind of like, some Q&As that I've collected from a couple groups, is there anything else you want to chime in on that we haven't covered? Any future research that might be coming down the
Oh,
pipeline or
oh yeah. I mean,
um,
I'm always tinkering around the lab. I mean, currently I'm working on a like gut relationships in PKD. So there's
mhm.
already a strong relationship between the gut and the kidney, and that in chronic kidney disease, there's a very strong correlation between dysbiosis and progression of toxins that are produced during dysbiosis, which just means all dysbiosis means is you had a gut microbiome that was one type and then it changed over time to a more negative, what they call negative type phenotype, where it means that there's these bacteria that are doing kind of mischievous things, making
Yeah.
compounds that aren't so good for the kidneys. And the question always was, our big question is like, is it the gut influencing the kidney, or is it the kidneys aren't filtering the things that the gut's making, and then that's like now you're building up these toxins because the kidney's not functioning. And we mentioned the model of, we believe that kidney injury is kind of the underlying thing that causes the progression of PKD. So one thing I'm researching now is whether or not the gut can injure the kidney through changes in the gut, and I believe so. Like I think that there's one paper that came out there's just a few months ago where they were looking at a particular mouse model and they didn't find any association of the gut to the PKD progression.
Mhm.
But I'm looking also not just at the gut itself, but also like, can you address gut injury or gut? Can you again make it better or make it worse? I got both of those sides of the coin, and it does look like that the gut is involved in the progression of PKD as well. And it makes sense. I don't know why it wouldn't be that way. It's very connected. So I just think that that's going to be. And there's also a lot of research on CKD and gut, where you address some of the bacterial dysbiosis by supplementation with particular bacteria, and that also slows progression of CKD. So that's
Oh,
already been,
wow.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, that is really great info too. Definitely yeah, it's I since I started this, I've been learning, yeah, guys, it's every part of your body is important. Then I
yes,
started learning about gut health and I'm like, oh, this is just wild how everything correlates.
yeah,
But yeah, would definitely it's future stuff would definitely love to, spend an actual, diving into gut health because that's something that you don't hear too much about. It's, always kidney. You're not hearing so much about, hey, these other organs out there are kind of can either drive progression or, potentially maybe pull it, stop it a little bit.
yeah. The gut stuff is pretty new. I mean, there's a lot of research has been done in the gut over the last 20 years or so, and it's always been kind of like there's so many moving parts that it is hard to like nail down specifics.
Hmm.
And it's still, I think the field is pretty vast. A lot of stuff known about it, but it's still very like early on in the understanding of like the implications of everything. And as a researcher, the reason we focus on the kidney is because every time you add another thing, you're just increasing the complexity of your experiment or your analysis. And so it becomes very difficult to be like, I want to research all of the organs at the same time. It almost is impossible to do because there's just not enough funding and time and resources to do it. So when you start to add systems, you can see why people kind of don't do that to begin with. So it's like, even just like today, I have to like look at slides, and so I'm imaging slides, and it's like you want to look at the gut and the kidney, so you just double all of the work you do just for one experiment every time you do something. So it just makes it a lot more just logistically difficult too.
Yeah, that is absolutely wild, and would love to have something just dedicated to gut health because, like you said, it's something very untalked about.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything else you want to share before we dive into some questions and stuff?
Nothing research-wise, no, nothing I can think of.
Okay, awesome. So I did collect some questions from a couple different groups out there, and do want to put one image on the screen here. Image I already sent in the chat, but a lot of people for protein powders,
Mhm.
and I have never really been one for protein powders. Like when I really bulked in my heavy lifting day, I just chicken parm, baby. It's all night long. Just load up on chicken parm. Good New York strip. So that's how I really got it. Just increase my protein. I when I stopped exercising, I started to consume this one protein powder. It was cookies and cream. Kind of want to leave out the manufacturer here because just in case you see this, not like it. But looking back on the ingredients of this, it is a shocking revelation. And one thing I've learned is that if you ever come across a product where the ingredients is a mile long, chances are there's a lot of hidden stuff in here. So, is there anything that you can recommend for people that are looking for like a protein powder? Because it's for so many, they contain so much of this crap. It's high fructose corn syrup that was in your research paper. Then I'm also cornstarch, natural, it's artificial. So like sucralose, which is just shocking that this is in a protein powder. By the way, it tasted amazing.
It
Um,
tastes pretty
but is there any recommend? This is part of one of the questions being asked about like protein powder. Would it be better just to eat like another piece of like 4 ounce chicken or some like ground beef, or is there any recommendations at all of how to really go about this for like gym lifters, and people that would like some more?
Yeah, I think that the thing about protein powder is it's convenient and it's bioavailable. I think that's
Hmm.
the big those are the big things about like why protein. And it's pretty inexpensive too. Like a scoop of protein powder is less than $1 usually if you just start looking at like whey protein concentrate, which is like kind of the thing that I would always use, and I still suggest people. I think if people ask me like what's the best protein powder, is whey protein concentrate is the cheapest and the best
Hmm.
version of protein. Then you have things like egg protein. And if you're doing anything that's plant based, I would suggest getting the isolates rather than using the concentrates because they have some other, if you take like a soy protein, for instance, like people who don't want to take animal protein, that's totally fine. If you take the soy protein and you don't get the isolate, then there are all of these concentrates have bioactive compounds in them because they're just taking the protein, denaturing it, and putting it into a jar. But if you take that with soy, soy has some stuff in there that's like some enzyme inhibitors that to kind of block protein digestion themselves. So it's like protein from animals don't have that issue. Plants can sometimes have that issue. So like pea protein or soy protein, if you just get the isolates, you're kind of going to get all of the amino acids you're looking for. You can always substitute or add on top essential amino acids as well if you're wanting to get like additional. Make sure that if you're doing a plant protein, adding essential
Hmm.
amino acids on top is probably a good idea just to make sure you're getting everything. Doesn't taste as good as the concentrates because of the isolates are always kind of they taste like amino acids. Amino acids taste kind of gross by themselves. They have like metal or bitter or a couple of glycine is sweet. So if you ever had glycine by itself, they all have a different flavor. But if you put them all together, it tastes disgusting. Like they're tryptophan and all these other guys are really gross. They're very bitter. And I think BCAAs are also pretty bitter as well. That's why they put all of this extra stuff in there is because of they're doing both whey protein isolate in this particular formulation and BCAAs. They're not tasty. So you got to put all that other stuff on top just to give it like a flavor and a mouthfeel. Um, if you like milk, then whey protein concentrate tastes just like milk most of the time, just water. So that's kind of what I would always just default to because it's cheap and it's effective, and you can find it in a lot of different variations for organic, grass-fed, whatever you want. You can find different versions.
That's really great info. Yeah, because I mean it's just a shocker, like seed oil in this one
Yeah.
brand that I was sucking down once or twice a day. But really good info for people on a different not an animal based protein like you said. That does tie into the first question. Thoughts slash feedback on the use of, and I'm not even sure, I think you partially answered this too, but thoughts slash feedback on the use of aminos, i.e., perfect aminos, their benefits, impact on fasting, and any negative, specific or not, to PKD.
Okay, yeah. The impact on fasting, if you're fasting, then you don't need any amino acids or anything. Like
Hmm.
if you're doing a fast, you're fasting. I think that there's a lot of questions I've had over the many years is about what do I eat when I'm fasting? And I'm always like, well, then you're not really doing the fast.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like it's kind of like in the name of the thing you're doing. So you just do that, and it's fasting. I was higher on in the past. I don't do it as much anymore because of just some of the I like to exercise frequently, and it's hard to schedule fast while you're exercising, so you kind of have to do it less frequently. I like to do if I'm going to do it, like maybe like a 18 to 24 hour or 36 hours, like maybe like from breakfast to dinner the next day, like that kind of stuff. When I have the time to, just every so often, that's kind of when I incorporate it. Or I'll do the more time restricted feeding style eating. Those are kind of the types of fasts that I'm more high on, is the time restricted feeding, because you're just cutting off in the evening when you're eating. That's kind of seems to be a lot of benefit in that, just not eating too late at night. That seems to be more beneficial, just because you're not processing all that stuff while you're sleeping. There's some reasons for that, why that's beneficial as well. As for the amino acids part, I don't know of any negative effects of amino acids on kidney function or for PKD. And I think the one that comes up is probably leucine, because leucine is a activator of mTOR. So I think that might come up as people might be down on leucine. But I don't know if anything about leucine supplementation specifically increasing mTOR activity in cysts that leads to disease progression. So that would be the only thing I would think people would probably be concerned with. Whole protein, if you're going to have a anabolic stimulus, it has to have leucine in it. I mean, we're getting mTOR signal, like we're going to get mTOR signal whether we want it or not. I think it's all context dependent. mTOR might be if mTOR is overactive, it seems to be a driver of PKD. The studies in our lab, we studied rapamycin as a inhibitor of mTOR, and that seemed to decrease progression and stop the disease from progressing. And my paper with ketogenic diet and fasting, we also saw that mTOR was down. But it doesn't mean that like intermittent activation of mTOR is bad. I mean, it's necessary because you have to have mTOR activated in order to do protein synthesis. Like you cannot make a protein without mTOR coming on at some level. Like it just has to come on as part of the pathway. But so I wouldn't be afraid of like protein and amino acids for activating mTOR specifically, but that would be my only thing that I would say that might come up as a question about specifically for amino acids.
That's really good to know. You partially answered this one too about the use of protein shakes. Because this next question definitely strength train 5 days a week. Do drink one serving of protein shakes post workout. Is there any certain protein shakes that's better or worse for PKD? You pretty much answered. Um, the other partial one to this question is creatine safe for PKD? I'm assuming this person might be talking about like oh boy like red meat and stuff, right? It's very high in creatine, like
Well, you can
uh
supplement creatine. Creatine is a
okay.
very common supplement. Yeah. So this is like one of the few supplements that actually does anything. So
Yep.
that's why it's actually an important one, because I think it's usually about 5 grams a day supplemented, is pretty the average is average. So creatine can be converted into creatinine,
Hmm.
right? And so it can raise your creatinine level in your when you take the urinalysis. So it looks like your kidney function goes down.
Yep.
So a lot of times people are very concerned about creatinine levels. If you have PKD, they're very conscientious about their creatinine level. So the reason we use creatinine as a measurement is because the kidney's supposed to filter it out. It's kind of like a passive filter, just kind of like goes into the urine. And so if creatinine levels are going up, it means that it's a proxy for the filtering. So the filtering is, if the creatinine is going up, then that means that the filtering is going down.
Hmm.
That's the equation that's used to do the estimated glomerular filtration. So people will see creatinine go up and they're like, oh, well, creatinine must be bad because creatinine went up. Like, so creatinine itself is not bad. It's not doing anything. It's just a marker of the kidney function. So if you have creatine and it turns into creatinine, yes, your creatinine level might go up, but it doesn't mean that the kidney function went down. It just means that the creatinine went up. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. So this question is related more to like taking it like a supplement, like
Yes.
a lot of people, full-blown carnivore, they do, take, supplements I've seen out there. But as for the way I kind of view this, which is, definitely good, um, is like red meat and stuff. So lamb, like
Oh,
beef, like is there any would there be any, negative like would that also increase what would
because the creatine is pretty low. Creatine is higher in red meat, but
yep,
it's very low. I mean, the amount of creatine that you can
gotcha.
extract from meat is very low overall. It doesn't mean it's not there. It's the highest amount you can get is from meat, but
Yep.
that's still not very much in relationship to like supplementation, which it's like one of the cheapest supplements you can buy that is very well researched. I mean, there's a ton of research on creatine, and that is it seems very safe in general. And I don't think that I've not seen any contraindication for PKD other than it converts into creatinine, which people are concerned with the creatinine level. And so if people are getting cystatin C as a measurement of kidney function, that's probably a better measurement than the creatinine itself.
Yep. Oh boy, who was it? Dr. Baker, I think his name is.
Huh?
Not sure if you know him. I think he's like the founder of the carnivore diet. I think he had a temporary drop, like you said, and then he did that other test and it showed, normal and stuff. But that's definitely great info because I have seen that floating around too, which is one of the things out there why some people in the community might, avoid red meat and stuff. Me personally, I tend to love red meat, so it's
Well,
definitely in my diet.
creatinine will also go up from exercise
Yep.
because of the protein turnover. Just if protein is being broken down, then it will go up in the blood. So
Oh, that's
that's where it's
really
coming.
good. Okay. It's now is there any time limit for like blood work out there? Because I've never heard that before. If you have like a renal panel, like let's say tomorrow, should you be doing like a high workout, eating a bunch of, like and taking supplements? You should like really avoid that, like
Yeah,
for
if you're trying to goose your numbers on your test, there's ways to do it for sure.
yeah.
So if you were gonna do like a really long or hard workout the day before you go out and get like really sore, like kind of you
Hmm.
got like like the DOMS thing, like the really sore legs. Like say you did a bunch of back squats and you really
Yep.
hammered your legs, you're probably gonna see a little bump in your creatinine from that because you're just getting a lot of damage, and the damage causes the turnover of the tissue, and that just leads to increased creatinine. Similarly, you might see more though if you did something like long endurance workout, or you were doing it for many days, like you're training for a marathon. Your creatinine is going to go up just because you're just causing so much muscular damage.
Okay. And all that stuff is definitely like temporary and stuff, right? It does
Yes.
go down. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's
because
why it's not a good marker.
yeah, it's because I've seen it's wild because you see a lot of, and it makes me wonder of maybe this is why a lot of people very much like mainstream have, a anti-narrative on protein is because maybe a lot of these bodybuilders are, like you said, goosing, some numbers and then it just messes up like the averages or something like that.
Yeah, excess protein causes you can have like some increase in ammonia genesis. So some of that, once you get over a certain number amount of protein, it can ferment in the gut if it because it gets like you get anaerobic fermentation that can occur. So you can get some negative things from like really large amounts of protein at one time. So if you're not assimilating it, like if you had like a digestive enzyme issue, say you like don't make a lot of hydrochloric acid in your stomach, or you don't make pepsin in your stomach and it doesn't work really well, people might notice that they get like really bloated after they eat a lot of protein. There might be like a digestive thing, and those can be that can be negative, right? Because now you're not getting sufficient. You're not like assimilating it. It's like just rotting essentially.
Mhm.
So that's the kind of stuff that when protein can be negative. But they've done studies on high protein assimilators where they can get like 200 grams into their body somehow. Like
Oh
they can
wow.
eat it at one
Yep.
time. They've done because they've done in the last few years they did like isotopic labeled way like proteins. They're like radio label with nitrogen, and then they'll give the people the drink and see how much they can actually assimilate. And I think the original studies that came up with like 50 grams per at a time were done they were done off of the excess nitrogen assimilation as like how much was being excreted like peed out. So they kind of came up with like these 50 grams, and then more recent studies did it with isotopic labeling, and they found that people were able to just eat large amounts of protein at one time and still get assimilation, like new protein synthesis. Like they do muscle biopsy, figure out like how much you actually assimilate from the one you're taking in, and that's like a much better measurement of how much protein you actually from your food into your tissues versus just turnover, because like it's just not as an efficient number. So that the new studies kind of would say like we have a very high capacity for assimilation if we're in the right circumstances.
That's all really great info. Yeah, no, it's definitely one topic that you you definitely have to have like 2, 3 episodes on its own just because it's very overlooked. Like I'm a very I see the importance of protein. I really do, and it
Yeah,
just it's an eye opener. Especially it's there's so much negativity that's with PKD and like protein, but so little can also cause like issues. Gotta find like a
yeah.
balance and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a balance thing. It's definitely an activity thing as well.
Yep.
I think we were adapted to consume a lot of protein just by evolutionary constraints. Like just protein is a very essential. I mean, it's the you can't do anything without it. It's fat and protein are the two essential macronutrients, and we evolved to eat a lot of protein. We're big muscular creatures. We need a lot of protein to function
Yep.
and grow. So it makes sense that, and we have a lot of pathways that to use it for energy too if it comes in excess. So we wouldn't have evolved those things if protein wasn't a very large component of our diet for throughout evolutionary time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely agree, and that's great information. Um, this next question, there's some words in here, definitely very big and sciencey. Neoglu glucanus. I think that's
I imagine that's that word. I
yep
think
of protein, depending on the type of protein. I think you did cover this. What is the difference between a shake made from multi components protein, whey, EAA powder, egg, steak, and tofu? Is there a different insulin release depending on which type of protein you consume?
yeah, so the first part of it was asking about, it says, I think they're concerned about the conversion of protein into sugar. I think
Okay.
that first, I think that's that question's asking about. And so gluconeogenesis does occur on, so imagine that if every time you get your body gets a hold of anything, it just kind of sends it into all these different pathways, right? There's a whole bunch. And with protein, it's the first thing is going to be, it's going to break down the protein. It's going to turn it into the small peptides or single amino acids. Usually it's small peptides. They get absorbed. And then, the serum levels of these things go up. And then you need insulin. Insulin's kind of like the signal to kind of like grab everything, like grab a bunch of stuff all the goodies while they're in circulation. So protein causes a small amount of insulin release. That's like part of what it does. Like that's just you get a little bit of insulin that comes out. It's not the same of a spike as if you had a high carbohydrate meal, but insulin is kind of like the signal for growth. So whenever you get a meal, like when you get protein or carbohydrates, insulin is released in order to assimilate that stuff. With fat doesn't require insulin to be stored. So you have like unlimited capacity pretty much for fat storage. You will run out. You will get very sick if you try to eat unlimited fat, though. It'll be very hard to do. But you can just kind of like just pack it away in different places and require insulin to do that. That's the that whole cholesterol LDL pathway stuff. So anyway, you get this little bit. You do get a bit of an insulin release. I don't think that insulin release is like it's something to worry about. That's just kind of like a thing that happens transiently, and it's part of the protein eating response. So anything that's extra that remains, that's over kind of like what gets assimilated can then spill into like other little pathways. And gluconeogenesis is only going to occur under like demand that when it's needed, right? Like, so if you're low in glucose, your body might convert the available protein into glucose, but the rate of that occurs is quite low. It's like, I think 10%, 15%. It's somewhere like that about the total amount of protein that's available. It can be converted into glucose. So if you eat a large, say you ate 100 grams of protein, you're talking 10 grams to 15 grams of glucose that could potentially be converted. And that's just because there's a rate limiting step in there that kind of gatekeeps all of the protein from being turned into sugar. It can only occur in one place. So it's not like every tissue can do it. And so it's not a very appreciable thing. Some people say that like it can turn into fat. Like if you eat too much protein, it makes you fat. I would say that's almost impossible, just based off of you'd have to turn the protein to glucose, and then you have to esterify the protein, which means you have to turn it into a fatty acid, and then you have to turn the fatty acid into a triglyceride, and then you have to store that. And that's a very inefficient process. So you're talking about, like, if you eat fat can just be immediately esterified in their blood and just or put into triglycerides and stored. So it's like a two-step process that can happen. In the instance of protein has to be turned into glucose, then it has to be lengthened into a fatty acid. So you need multiple glucose molecules to come together to turn it into a fat. And then you have to esterify it, which means you have to take glycerol and then stick the fatty acid on it and store it. And so it's a multi-step process. What you could argue, this is one argument, is that the backbones of triglycerides is called glycerol, and that's usually the thing that is limited in like any time you're trying to make triglycerides. The glycerol is the limiting thing. Like if you're doing a ketogenic diet, every time you eat a triglyceride, you're getting one glycerol for the 3 fatty acids that are attached to it. And that glycerol can be converted into glucose. So there's a way to turn glycerol into glucose and then turn glucose into glycerol. And when you're in ketosis, one of the things that's happening is that your body's taking the glycerols and burning them into glucose. So that's why you always have a supply of glucose if you're eating fat. You always get some glucose out of that process. It's not a lot, but it's something that the body's like using, and it's the reason the fats become free fatty acids rather than triglycerides, which are stored. So the
Hmm.
triglycerides, the stored form, and the free fatty acids are the ones that are floating around to be able to go be used as energy. And so you could take glucose, make a glycerol, and then attach fats to it and store it. But that's just very inefficient and not the way that's usually done. It's usually taken from fat or from sugars. So something like fructose has a very simple conversion from fructose to glycerol. And that's one of the reasons fructose is so fat promoting, is because it can be turned into glycerol directly. Not that it turns into fat, but it makes the free fatty acids that you eat easier to store. So you have more of the backbone that everything's stored to. So there's the long answer, but that's the thorough one.
I've learned so much during this. I know a lot of people definitely gonna, your brain is filled with knowledge around there, which is great. Yeah, when I'm gonna be rewatching this for it, I'm gonna be taking down notes and stuff. But yeah, I mean that is a great scientific researcher answer. But you said this person was probably a little worried about obviously like it
The
turning over,
conversion.
yeah,
Yeah.
conversion. So you would, in your it's your opinion, it shouldn't be like an issue at all and stuff.
It's almost inconsequential because of the amount of work, the amount of steps it takes. You're talking about percentage points of conversion, and if it's almost inconsequential at the amount of protein we eat versus like what it's converted into. It almost doesn't matter. Like it just is. You can kind of consider just noise in the system is like how much it's actually affecting it. You would have to really be in special circumstances for that to make big differences. And I think it's something I've heard. I've heard this argument quite a bit about it turning into fat, and it's like not
Hmm.
untrue. It's just not relevant to like the big picture about what's actually going on with protein intake. And then for the other part, I think I did answer about the whey and the different
Hmm.
types of
Yep.
isolate versus concentrate. I think those are like the big differences. People might not know what the differences are, but you might see like partially, you see like hydrolyzed, isolate, concentrate. You might see all of those different words. So you just remember that the concentrate just means that it's like milk protein or whatever the protein source is. They kind of just filter it and they get just the full proteins. The isolates means that they've broken it all down into individual amino acids using some hydrolysis method, like something. I don't know. They can use different ways to do it. And then there's like partially hydrolyzed, which is like there's peptides and it's just partially digested already. So those are the only things you might see differently. So the only ones I'm really ever concerned with are concentrates and isolates because those are the the easiest to kind of figure out what they are. And then when it comes to like whole proteins, things like egg and milk are highly digestible. Steak, beef, those things are, all beef and most meats are also highly bioavailable. When it comes to like beans, tofu, peas, they have lower digestibility. Things like soy are even further down because there's actually inhibitors in the protein that is blocks the breakdown of protein. There's actually a paper I might be able to find it that's just actually has all of these things listed just because they did the
Hmm.
experiment. They're like, which was the bioavailability of all these different proteins. So that information exists. You can find this list of bioavailability. And so it's why whey is the best because it's just the best in the category of bioavailability. And then isolates for plant proteins, I think, are the next if you don't do the animal stuff. And
Yeah.
essential amino acids are good too. I think that those are fine.
Yeah, no, that's such great info, especially for people out there, wanting, more, especially for workouts. Last question here. Does Keto Citra have any negative impact on maintaining muscle over time for people not exercising? I think they might be referring to someone who is just on a ketogenic diet, worrying about the BHB, like tearing apart like their muscles or something.
Oh,
That's how I got from it.
yeah, I don't. I can't. I'm having a hard time understanding why specifically keto citra would be negative. Not exercising will tear apart your muscle the most. That,
That's, I fully agree. Yep.
Yeah, so there's some interesting research out there on bed rest experiments. They've taken fully trained people and they just force them into these, like they're trying to recreate like what happens if somebody gets like in a car
Hmm.
accident and they're put into a coma. They want
Yep.
to understand like the rate of progression for loss of muscle, and so they'll do these experiments where they have like a person, really muscular person, put them on bed rest like for 2 weeks, and it's like monitored bed rest. They're not allowed to do anything, like literally just laying down. And they show the rate of progression of muscle loss is out of control. It's hard to believe like how fast
Hmm.
almost all of our muscle if we just don't move. But that's not most people. They're not bed rested. They're still moving. What you can do just to kind of mitigate that loss, they found just walking alone. Like if you're doing a fast, like you're fasting, like walking preserves the muscle mass. Like
Oh, wow.
activity during the fast. A lot of times people will be like concerned that they shouldn't exercise during fasting. That's not true. You should definitely be exercising. It's that you're going to modify the exercise you're doing. You're going to be, you're still if a lot of people are still going to consume electrolytes, like if they're doing a like a water fast or
Hmm.
something like that, they would still be getting electrolytes. And if you're sweating, you're probably going to want to have replenishment, especially with PKD. I assume the water is going to be more of an issue. So still doing water fast, but if they just might feel lethargic, they're not going to want to exercise. But really, the research is showing like if you don't do anything, that's when you see all the catabolism from fasting. If you're walking, you mitigate most of that alone because the body's getting a stimulus saying like there's still activity to do. If you were to think about this from like in evolution, we would always be working even though we're fasted. And if you just ate all your muscle immediately, that would be a very poor use of resources because muscle tissue is very expensive to maintain. So the
Hmm.
signal is that as long as it's in use, you're going to try to maintain it. And so there's a lot of tricks the body can do to kind of maintain the protein that's there, and it's just use fat to kind of like pay for all the costs of maintaining that tissue. So during a fast, you kind of want to really force everything into the fat metabolism. So if you're not moving, then it's like, well, we don't need all this extra protein. We're just going to get rid of it. That's kind of the signal that happens from the not moving around. So it's really important to just remember that the movement is really valuable during any time of fasting, or you know just if you're supplementing with ketosutra. I don't see that's going to
Yep.
have any effect. But yeah, just making sure that you're continuing to move.
That is really great info. When I do prolonged fasting, like 48 hours, I'm like an introvert with all the ketones. It feels like I chugged a pot of coffee. I do grocery shopping, so I do very big advocate of just walking in general. That is like trying to sway away from, like I just it's believe in walking. Yeah, I can see anyone, shape, size, whether you're, very lean or, have a lot of reserves, just walking. I just want to say thank you once again, Dr. Torres, for every single thing that you and everyone at Santa Barbara Nutrients do, especially Dr. Wimes' laboratory. I really do believe that your research and you all definitely has preserved my life because my progression was out of really just crazy, and would love to talk more with you, especially once I get new data next month and stuff and see how everything is going.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping they'll have some more research to come out in the next probably. I'm hoping by the end of the year I'll have this next paper out. Everything takes forever, but that's that's my goal at this point is have some new stuff by the end of the year.
Yep, that's awesome. Thank you once again for all your hard work, and hopefully everyone watching definitely got a lot of great information.
Yeah, thanks for having me.